What if I told you that the Cleveland Browns never drafted Shedeur Sanders to actually play quarterback? What if, instead of grooming him as the future of their franchise, they had something far more calculated in mind, something that has nothing to do with football and everything to do with business? Because right now, the biggest mystery in the NFL isn't who's going to win the Super Bowl or which coach is on the hot seat. It's why one of the most electrifying rookies in recent memory is being buried at the bottom of a depth chart behind quarterbacks, who, frankly, shouldn't even be standing in his way. Think about it. Shedeur Sanders, the son of one of the most iconic football figures of all time, Coach Prime. A quarterback with national buzz, millions of fans, and more hype surrounding his name than almost any other rookie this year. He shows up in Cleveland, flashes talent in preseason, proves he belongs, and then he gets shoved all the way down to fourth string. Fourth, behind a 39-year-old Joe Flacco who was literally retired last season. Behind Kenny Pickett, who Pittsburgh basically gave up on. Behind Dillon Gabriel, a solid prospect, sure, but no one is claiming he's the future face of the league. So here's the question you should be asking yourself. Does that sound like football logic? Or does it sound like a setup? Because whispers are already swirling inside league circles, coaches are calling around, insiders are hinting at something bigger. And when you start piecing it together, the picture becomes clear the Browns might not be developing Shedeur Sanders at all. They might be staging him, propping him up as a shiny asset, squeezing every ounce of value out of his name, and preparing to cash in at the right moment. And if that sounds crazy, ask yourself why Kevin Stefanski, the Browns head coach, already admitted, "We'd like to keep everybody, but that's not realistic." That's not just an offhand comment, that's a clue, a slip, a sign that Cleveland already knows someone's on the chopping block. And the fact that Shedeur, the guy who sells more jerseys and pulls more eyeballs than anyone else on the roster, is being sidelined while lesser talents get reps, that's no coincidence. Your gut told you something wasn't right. That's why you clicked this video. And you're not wrong, because what's happening in Cleveland doesn't just affect Shedeur Sanders. It's a window into how NFL franchises really operate when the cameras are off. It's about business over football, branding over development, money over merit. So buckle up, because once you see how deep this rabbit hole goes, you'll never look at the Browns or the NFL the same way again. Let's start with the most obvious and alarming part of this entire situation, the Cleveland Browns depth chart. Because no matter how you spin it, it simply doesn't make sense. Here's the reality. Shedeur Sanders came into preseason with a spotlight brighter than almost any rookie. Millions of fans tuned in to see him. Every snap he took was analyzed. And what did he do with that pressure? Had delivered. His pocket presence looked mature beyond his years. His arm talent, sharp, crisp, and accurate. He showed poise, command, and the ability to read defenses traits you don't expect to see polished this early in a rookie's career. And yet, despite proving he belonged on an NFL field, the Browns didn't reward him. They buried him. Fourth string, sitting behind three quarterbacks whose resumes raise more questions than answers. Let's break this quarterback room down, because when you see it on paper, the absurdity becomes crystal clear. First up, Joe Flacco. Yes, the same Joe Flacco who once won a Super Bowl, but that was more than a decade ago. He's 39 years old, was retired not long ago, and was brought back as a temporary stopgap. Is this really the guy who should be standing in the way of the most hyped rookie quarterback in the league? Next, Kenny Pickett. Pittsburgh drafted him in the first round, gave him every chance to be the future, and quickly realized he wasn't the answer. He struggled with consistency, decision-making, and accuracy. The Steelers didn't hesitate to move on, and yet somehow, in Cleveland, he's not only on the roster, he's ahead of Shedeur. Why? Then there's Dillon Gabriel, a solid third-round pick, talented in his own right, but let's be honest, he doesn't bring the same electricity, the same upside, or the same brand power as Shedeur. He's a nice prospect, but no one's confusing him with the face of a franchise. So let's ask the question again. Why is Shedeur, the guy who brings excitement, marketability, and legitimate talent, sitting fourth on this depth chart? The answer isn't about football, it's about politics and business. Because if this were truly about talent, performance, and potential, there's no scenario where Shedeur Sanders is sitting behind three players who either peaked years ago, failed to prove themselves, or project as career backups. Fans sense it. Reporters are whispering about it. Even NFL insiders are starting to raise eyebrows. And when you zoom out, this depth chart doesn't look like a mistake. It looks like a strategy, a carefully constructed move to control the narrative, keep Shedeur on ice, and quietly raise speculation around his future. Because in the NFL, depth charts don't just tell you who's playing, they tell you the politics of the locker room. And right now, Cleveland's depth chart is screaming one thing loud and clear: Shedeur Sanders was never meant to climb it. And that leads us straight to the next question. If the Browns don't plan to develop him as their future quarterback, then what's the real plan here? Now, here's where things get even more suspicious. It's one thing to stash a rookie at the bottom of a depth chart. Teams have done that before. But what's happening behind closed doors tells a completely different story, and it's one that fans aren't supposed to hear. Because while Shedeur Sanders is standing on the sidelines, NFL insiders say the phones in Cleveland are buzzing. Quietly, discreetly, but they're buzzing. Coaches from other teams have already started asking the Browns about availability. Think about that. Shedeur hasn't even played meaningful NFL snaps, and yet executives around the league are making calls, sniffing around, wondering if he's really stuck in Cleveland for the long haul. And here's the kicker, Cleveland isn't exactly shutting those calls down. Reports suggest Andrew Berry and the Browns front office are listening. They're not committing, they're not denying, they're just letting the conversations happen. Which, if you know anything about the NFL, is a red flag in itself. Because if you truly believed in a young quarterback, if you thought he was the future of your franchise, the calls wouldn't even last 5 seconds. The answer would be an immediate no, he's untouchable. Instead, silence. Non-committal answers. The kind of vague responses that tell you there's a bigger game at play. And then there's Kevin Stefanski's slip-up, the one comment that may have accidentally exposed the Browns' hand. When asked about keeping 4 quarterbacks on the roster, he said, "I'd like to keep everybody, but it's not realistic." That's not coach speak. That's not some throwaway line, that's an admission. It means someone is on the move, someone's getting dealt. And if you connect the dots, it starts to look a lot like Shedeur Sanders is the real piece they're dangling. Now, of course, the Browns won't come out and say this publicly. They'll smile for the cameras, they'll talk about development, they'll insist that competition makes everyone better. But behind the scenes, these trade whispers are getting louder, and the smoke is starting to look a lot like fire. And ask yourself, why would other teams even be calling about a 4th-string rookie unless they sensed something was up? NFL executives don't waste their time chasing shadows. If multiple organizations are circling, it's because they know Cleveland might actually be open for business. This isn't random. This isn't coincidence. This is how front offices operate when they're trying to quietly shop a player without tipping off the fan base. Keep him buried on the depth chart, build intrigue around his untapped potential, and wait for the right moment to cash in. But here's the part that will really make your blood boil. It doesn't look like Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, or even Joe Flacco are the ones on the trade block. No, the whispers point straight at Shedeur Sanders, and the reason why will make you sick. On the surface, it might seem strange. Why would Colorado, a program in transition and desperately in need of stability, be so open to the idea of moving on from Shedeur Sanders, their starting quarterback and the literal son of Coach Prime? But when you dig into the whispers coming out of Boulder, the picture becomes much more complex and much more dramatic. First, let's talk about the locker room dynamics. Multiple insiders have suggested that Shedeur's presence, rather than uniting the team, may be creating a subtle divide. It's no secret that when the head coach's son is also the star quarterback, favoritism becomes a question even if Coach Prime doesn't intend it to be. Teammates begin to wonder, is Shedeur untouchable? Does he get a different standard of treatment compared to the rest of the roster? That doubt, even if unspoken, can eat away at chemistry, and we've already seen hints of frustration in how players react on and off the field. Then, there's the NFL draft conversation. Scouts are divided on Shedeur. Some believe he has the tools, a strong arm, composure under pressure, and flashes of brilliance. But others point to his tendency to hold the ball too long, his inconsistent reads, and most importantly, the fact that his stats don't always translate into wins. If the NFL consensus is lukewarm, Colorado risks anchoring TH. Then there's the second tier of programs, those schools that are on the cusp of breaking into true national prominence but haven't quite gotten over the hump. Think Miami, Florida State, Oregon, or Penn State. For them, a quarterback of Shedeur's caliber isn't just a luxury, it could be the missing piece to push them into the playoff conversation. And you can guarantee that boosters and NIL collectives in those areas would open their wallets wide if there were even a whisper of availability. But perhaps the most interesting group to watch are the schools who have struggled to establish a true identity under center. Programs like Auburn, Michigan State, or even Texas A&M have had high expectations but inconsistent quarterback play in recent years. A player like Shedeur Sanders represents not only on-field production but also instant credibility. With his name, his family's influence, and his proven ability to perform under pressure, he would immediately change the perception of a program that's been stuck in the mud. And we can't ignore the NFL implications. Scouts are watching this drama unfold too. Every move Shedeur makes is scrutinized because they're evaluating not just his arm strength or footwork, but also how he handles adversity, leadership questions, and rumors like these. If he ends up in a program where he's the unquestioned starter and the system is tailored to him, that could boost his draft stock considerably. On the flip side, if he's seen as someone who can be pushed out or treated as expendable, NFL teams will take note of that dynamic as well. So, while this might feel like an internal Colorado drama, the reality is that the entire college football world has their eyes glued to Boulder. Rivals are watching, boosters are calculating, and coaches are quietly making their lists, just in case. Whether Colorado realizes it or not, every rumor that leaks is like throwing chum in shark-infested waters, and those sharks are circling fast. When we zoom out from the micro details of depth charts, quarterback controversies, and preseason performances, we start to see the bigger picture. And that picture isn't painted with touchdowns, interceptions, or even Super Bowl rings. It's painted with dollar signs, sponsorships, and television ratings. The NFL is, first and foremost, a business. For all the love fans have for the purity of the game, the league itself is a billion-dollar machine, where decisions are often made not based on who throws the prettiest spiral, but on who brings in the most money, attention, and marketability. Take Shedeur Sanders' situation, for example. On the surface, it looks like a classic football debate. Is he good enough to be a starter, or does he still need time to develop? But peel back the curtain, and it becomes clear that his name, his family, and his brand have just as much, if not more weight, than his arm strength or field vision. The NFL knows that attaching the Sanders legacy to any franchise generates instant headlines. Deion Sanders, primetime himself, is one of the most recognizable figures in sports history. His son playing quarterback in the NFL? That's not just a storyline, it's a marketing goldmine. And this is where business often trumps football. Fans may look at stats, completion percentages, and pocket presence. Executives, however, may be looking at jersey sales, television contracts, and how many casual viewers tune into a preseason game just to catch a glimpse of Shedeur. In that sense, Shedeur isn't just competing against other quarterbacks for a job. He's being positioned as a brand asset in a league that thrives on narrative as much as performance. This isn't the first time the NFL has operated this way. Think back to Tim Tebow. On paper, Tebow was a quarterback with questionable mechanics, inconsistent accuracy, and limited success. Yet every time he was on a roster, stadiums filled up, jerseys sold out, and ESPN couldn't stop running segments about him. Tebow was bigger than football. He was a cultural event. Teams knew this, and some signed him not because he gave them the best chance to win games, but because he gave them the best chance to sell tickets and boost relevance. Shedeur's case feels eerily similar. The NFL may see him as a potential long-term project, but in the short term, they see marketability. And that means someone else, perhaps a proven but less flashy quarterback, might have to be moved aside. That's where the business over football argument gets strongest. When player personnel decisions are made based on how well someone can trend on social media, rather than how well they can execute a 2-minute drill. This is the cruel reality of the modern NFL. It's not just a league of competition, it's a league of entertainment, and entertainment demands stars. For the NFL, Shedeur Sanders represents not just a quarterback, but a storyline they can sell, a personality they can market, and a bridge between generations of fans who grew up watching his father and now want to see if the son can live up to the name. At the end of the day, this isn't just about the Denver Broncos quarterback depth chart, it's about how the NFL operates as a whole. A league that thrives on drama, thrives on headlines, and thrives on keeping fans emotionally invested even if that means football purity sometimes takes a back seat to business priorities. The clock is ticking, and everyone in the football world knows it. Decisions about players, depth charts, and trades are never just about talent alone. They're about timing, leverage, perception, and the larger chess game that franchises play when building their rosters. In the case of Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel, that clock is running louder with every practice snap, every press conference, and every rumor that leaks out. For Shedeur, the spotlight has been brighter than ever since he entered the NFL pipeline with his father Deion Sanders as his coach and mentor. The narrative around him has never been purely about football, it's been about legacy, family, and brand power. That combination makes him both an asset and a target. Teams see not only his potential on the field, but also the immense marketability that comes with the Sanders name. But here's the catch. Brand hype without immediate production can create impatience. If Shedeur doesn't show the kind of growth fans and executives expect, that ticking clock will only get louder. For Dillon Gabriel, the stakes are just as high, albeit for different reasons. Gabriel is the kind of quarterback franchises love to undervalue a workhorse, a competitor, a player who has had to fight for every ounce of respect he's earned. While Shedeur enters the league with a spotlight already on him, Gabriel has had to carve out his place, often overlooked until his play forces recognition. That dynamic makes the clock more dangerous for him. If the team leans too heavily toward protecting Shedeur's brand value, Gabriel could find himself on the outside looking in, regardless of how well he performs on the field. And make no mistake, performances in preseason and practice matter, but business decisions often weigh heavier than stat lines. The ticking clock isn't just about the players, though. It's about the organization itself. Every move the front office makes is scrutinized by fans, the media, and rival franchises. Do they keep both quarterbacks and risk a toxic environment where one is always looking over his shoulder? Or do they move one of them, likely Gabriel, to create clarity, but in doing so, potentially hand another team a diamond in the rough? There is no easy answer, and every day that passes without a decision tightens the pressure valve. And then there's the NFL as a whole. This league thrives on narratives, and few stories are bigger than the rise or fall of a quarterback. The league knows fans buy into drama as much as they buy into touchdowns. With Shedeur, the NFL has a storyline it can market endlessly, the son of primetime, trying to carve out his own prime. But if that story doesn't deliver in real time, the backlash could be brutal, both for the player and the team. So, what happens next? That's the million-dollar question. The clock is ticking for Shedeur Sanders to prove he's more than hype. The clock is ticking for Dillon Gabriel to force the issue and demand respect through performance. And the clock is ticking for the franchise itself, which must decide whether to play it safe, gamble big, or reshuffle the deck before it's too late. In the end, the NFL is unforgiving. You either use your time wisely, or you run out of it. Right now, this team has a choice to make. And every second counts. If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.